The sun shone brightly over the city park that afternoon, casting long golden rays through the leafy canopy of oak and maple trees. A gentle breeze whispered through the branches, carrying the scent of freshly mown grass and the distant thrum of traffic from the busy street just beyond the park gates. In one quiet corner, a man dressed in a crisp navy suit sat alone on a weathered wooden bench. His polished leather shoes rested lightly on the gravel pathway beneath him, and beside him on the bench lay an open lunchbox filled with an elegantly arranged meal, a perfectly seared salmon fillet sprinkled with herbs, a small salad of crisp greens and cherry tomatoes, and a side of creamy risotto that steamed in the warm afternoon air. This man was James Owen, a self-made millionaire and the founder of a fast-growing technology company. He had arrived at the park seeking a moment of calm amid the whirlwind of board meetings, investor calls, and product launches that filled his days. From the moment he stepped away from his sleek black car and climbed the stone steps into the park, he felt the cares of his busy life begin to slip away. Here, among children chasing pigeons and elderly couples strolling arm in arm, he hoped to find a rare pocket of peace. Across the lawn, under the shade of an ancient elm tree, sat a small boy on a worn patch of grass. He was no more than 12 years old, with dark, curly hair that curled around his forehead, and big, curious eyes that darted back and forth, taking in the world with an intensity beyond his years. He wore a faded t-shirt that had once been bright yellow but had since become a dull pastel hue, and his sneakers, held together by fraying laces, were scuffed at the toes. In his lap rested half of a homemade sandwich, 2 slices of soft white bread, a thin layer of cheese, and a smattering of lettuce that had begun to wilt in the heat. The boy, Malik Jackson, had come to the park on his own, as he did most days, after school. His mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, one as a cleaner in an office building downtown and one as a cashier at a neighborhood grocery store. Between the cost of rent, utilities, and the few extras Malik needed for school, money was tight. Lunch at home was often a simple sandwich, sliced fruit, or sometimes nothing at all if his mother's shifts ran late. But today Malik had managed to save a bit of his allowance to buy that sandwich, and he treasured every bite. He watched James Owen from a distance, eyes flicking between the expensive-looking meal and the boy's own modest lunch. There was something about the man's quiet confidence, the way he sat upright yet relaxed, that pulled at Malik's curiosity. The shiny lunchbox, the neat arrangement of food, and the faint clang of a silver fork on porcelain all spoke of a world far removed from his own. As Malik bit into his sandwich, he felt the soft bread and the cool crunch of lettuce ease his hunger for a moment. But when he finished the last bite, he realized how small his portion had been. His stomach grumbled softly, reminding him that he was still hungry. He looked up again at the man on the bench, swallowed hard, and hesitated. Every fiber of his being told him to leave the man in peace. That was the polite thing to do. Yet hunger has a way of loosening every restraint. "Sir?" Malik said, his voice soft but clear. He stood up and approached the bench slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's eyes flicked down to meet his. "Sir, can I have your leftovers?" James's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He looked at the boy, surprised. The question hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, ready to shatter at any moment. Almost instinctively, James set his fork down on the edge of his plate. He observed the boy's thin frame, the dirt smudged on his knees where the grass had rubbed through his jeans, and the hopeful look in his eyes. For a moment, James did not speak. He simply watched. Around them, the park continued its slow, undisturbed rhythm. A dog barked in the distance, a bicycle bell tinkled, leaves rustled overhead, and the 2 of them, one man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, the other a boy who sometimes went to bed hungry, stood on opposite sides of a simple question. Malik shifted from one foot to the other, the sunlight glinting off the edge of the park's ornamental fountain nearby. His hands fidgeted at his sides. He had never done something like this before. His mother always taught him to be polite, to ask for permission. But she also reminded him that he should never be ashamed to ask for help when he really needed it. So here he stood, cheeks flushed, and hunger stronger than any fear of embarrassment. James glanced down at his food again, the plate still nearly full. He had enjoyed the first few bites of the salmon, admiring the way the herbal crust cracked, just enough under his fork. But suddenly the meal felt heavy in his stomach, a reminder not of peace but of privilege. He thought about all the times he had taken discretionary lunches in quiet parks, reading business journals or scrolling through emails on his phone. He remembered the feeling of being above the concerns of ordinary life, so absorbed in his own world that he seldom noticed the people around him. He looked back at Malik's hopeful face. The boy waited patiently, and suddenly, James saw more than hunger in those eyes. He saw courage. It takes courage for a child to approach a stranger, especially one who seems so different. It takes courage to speak up when you are hungry and afraid. And in that moment, James felt something shift inside him. He realized that this boy might need more than leftovers. He might need someone to see him as a person. Without a word, James stood up and stepped to the side of the bench, motioning for Malik to come closer. Malik's heart leapt. He edged forward, eyes wide with cautious optimism. James picked up his plate and gestured for Malik to take it. As Malik reached out, James turned and walked a few steps away in silence, leaving the plate on the ground. Malik knelt and set the plate on his lap, peering down at the rich salmon, the bright salad, and the creamy risotto. He had never seen food presented like this before, each element arranged carefully, each bite promising a new flavor. His stomach growled again, and he closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the thought of tasting it. He took his first bite, and the flavors exploded in his mouth. The salt of the fish, the tang of the tomatoes, the soft, comforting creaminess of the rice. He chewed slowly, as if afraid the taste might vanish if he hurried. And all the while, James watched him, standing a little distance away, arms folded, face calm but attentive. As Malik ate, James allowed himself to feel something unfamiliar: humility. He thought about the barriers he had built around himself. His wealth, his status, his carefully constructed image of success. All of those barriers melted away as he watched this boy savor a meal that had cost him little more than a question and an act of kindness. When the plate was empty, Malik looked up at James, eyes bright and grateful. He stood and carried the plate to a trash bin, then returned and offered James his hand. "Thank you, sir," he said softly. James shook his hand, nodded, and for the first time that day, he smiled without reservation. In that simple, unspoken exchange, both of their worlds had changed, and neither of them would ever quite be the same again. James walked away from the bench without a word. The soft crunch of gravel followed each of his polished shoes as he left the untouched plate of food behind. He stopped a few steps away, turned his head slightly, and watched the boy. Malik knelt beside the plate, eyes wide with wonder as he set it gently on the grass and picked up the fork. James stood still as if rooted to the spot, feeling something he could not name stirred deep inside him. Malik took a small bite of the creamy risotto, then another, barely daring to breathe between mouthfuls. Each taste seemed to surprise him, more than the last. He looked over his shoulder at James as though expecting approval or an invitation to share more. When he saw that James remained silent, he felt an odd mixture of relief and confusion. Relief because he had the meal all to himself. Confusion because he did not understand why James had not simply packed up and gone. As Malik ate, he reached into the pocket of his faded jeans and felt the stiff edge of a paper card. He pulled it out. A white rectangle printed with bold black letters. James Owen's name, the name of his technology company, a phone number and an address in the city. Malik turned the card over in his hand. He had not noticed it earlier, tucked under the tray beside the plate. A business card left like a breadcrumb in this small, unplanned moment between two lives. Malik's heart raced. He didn't know what to do with the card. Was it a message? A gift? A coincidence? His mind filled with questions, simple and urgent. After he finished the meal, he folded the card carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket. He stood up, brushed bits of grass from his jeans, and glanced toward James. The man was still standing there, his hands folded behind his back, gazing out at the trees beyond. Neither of them spoke. A soft breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying the distant laughter of other children playing and the faint hum of traffic beyond the park gates. Malik felt the weight of the business card against his chest, as if it carried more importance than its small size suggested. He wondered if he should follow James, ask questions, or simply thank him again. But before he could decide, James turned and walked away, heading toward the park exit. Malik hesitated, then tucked the card into his pocket and hurried to catch up. He called, "Sir," softly, but James did not stop. Instead, he walked on, as if he believed their brief encounter was over. Malik slowed and watched James fade down the pathway. Then he stood alone, the afternoon light shifting in the trees, and realized he did not even know the man's first question. Why did he follow him back then? Why had he left the meal untouched? Malik turned the card in his hand once more. His mother would be curious about this. She worried constantly about money and whether her simple pay could cover rent and school supplies. She believed in kindness but also in caution. Malik folded the business card and tucked it away in a small coin purse he carried. He wanted to show it to her later, when they were safe at home. With one last glance at the empty bench, he pocketed his sandwich wrapper and headed for the bus stop. That evening, back in his small apartment with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering lamp, Malik sat at the kitchen table. His mother was busy washing dishes in a basin of soapy water. The small stove in the corner hummed as a pot of lentils boiled gently. Malik cleared his throat and gently placed the business card before her. "Mom, look what I found," he said. His mother wiped her hands on a towel and took the card. She squinted at the fine print, then smiled gently. "James Owen," she read. "He's a big name in the tech world. Did he give you this?" Malik shook his head. "I asked him for leftovers," he confessed, cheeks flushing, "and he left his meal. I found this under the tray." His mother's eyes softened. She placed the card on the table and sat beside her son. "You did what you needed to do," she said quietly. "It takes courage to ask for help." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "We don't know what it means, but let's keep it safe." That night, Malik lay in his narrow bed above the kitchen. He stared at the ceiling as his mother tucked him in. His mind replayed the taste of the salmon and risotto, the way each bite had felt like a small miracle. He thought about the man, in the suit, so quiet and still. And he thought about the business card, heavy with possibility. Unable to sleep, he slipped out of bed, crept back to the kitchen table, and stared at the card under the dim lamp. He turned it over and over, memorizing the letters, the phone number, the address. He wondered if he would ever be brave enough to call. Meanwhile, in a sleek downtown apartment far above the city streets, James Owen sat at his desk. The glow of his laptop screen illuminated his face, revealing tired lines around his eyes. He had returned from the park feeling oddly unsettled. He replayed the scene in his mind. The boy's thin frame, the way he knelt beside the plate, the silent exchange that had ended without a word. James stared at the empty spot on his desk where the lunchbox had sat. He realized he had felt no relief or satisfaction when he walked away. Instead, he felt a hollow in his chest, a question that would not leave him. Why had he been so silent? James closed his laptop and walked to the window. Below, the city lights blinked like stars on the ground. He thought about his life. Board, meetings, investor dinners, product launches, and marketing pitches. He thought about the luxury apartment, the sleek car he parked in the underground garage, the private chef who prepared his meals. Yet here was a boy, younger than his own nephew, whose simple question had shaken him more than any business challenge ever had. He sat back down at his desk and opened a new document. At the top, he typed 2 words. Find Malik. Underneath, he wrote the address from the card, a modest community center in a neighborhood he barely knew. He paused, his fingers hovering above the keyboard. What would he say? Why would he go? He could imagine the raised eyebrows of his board members if he told them he was spending time tutoring children. He could hear clients questioning how this would boost profits. But the more he thought about it, the more urgent his decision felt. He could not ignore the boy's question, nor the silence that had followed. He realized that in all his success, he had quietly built walls around himself. Walls of status, walls of routine, walls of certainty. And now he felt drawn to break through one of those walls and step into a different world, however briefly. He typed an email to his assistant. "Tomorrow at noon I'll be unavailable for meetings. I'm stepping out." He clicked send before doubt could stop him. Then he closed his eyes and imagined himself back in the park, watching Malik eat, the business card tucked safely in the boy's pocket. For the first time in years, he felt something he had long forgotten. Simple hope. The next morning, James arrived at the community center 10 minutes before noon. The building was unassuming. A brick facade, a handful of windows, and a sign above the door that read, City Youth Center. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of crayons and cleaning solution. Children bustled around, laughing and calling out to friends. A woman at the front desk greeted him with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. James reached into his jacket and pulled out the business card. "I'm looking for Malik Jackson," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I met him in the park yesterday." The woman's eyes brightened. "Yes, he's here. He helps with table games, then heads off to his homework club. If you'll wait a moment, I'll let him know you're here." James nodded and sat on a plastic chair along the wall. He watched through the open doorway as the woman spoke into a walkie-talkie. A few minutes later, Malik emerged, his shirt a little creased, his shoes scuffed as always. When he saw James, his eyes widened in surprise. "I knew you'd come," Malik said. James stood and smiled gently. "Yes," he replied. "I wanted to say thank you, properly this time." He motioned toward the empty plate, now neatly washed and stacked in a kitchen corner. "And I'd like to help if you'll let me." Malik's face lit up with curiosity and relief. He nodded, and together they walked into the sunlit room where other children were learning and playing. As James followed Malik inside in silence, he felt he was stepping into something new, something uncertain, but filled with promise. And he knew that this silent gesture, both from him and the boy, was only the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. James arrived at the youth center just as the afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting warm squares of light across the polished linoleum floor. He carried a small stack of books under one arm and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. The chatter of children drifted from classrooms down the hallway, voices eager for games, lessons, and friendly competition. He took a deep breath, smoothing the crease in his jacket, then stepped into the main room where tables and chairs were arranged in neat rows. Malik spotted him first. He was seated at a table near the back, surrounded by classmates working on homework assignments. Malik's dark curls bounced as he looked up in surprise. He closed his math textbook halfway and waved. "You came," he said. James smiled, setting down his books and bag on a nearby chair. "I promised," he replied. His voice carried softly, but enough that a few children glanced over curiously. He crouched to Malik's eye level and tapped the stack of books. "I brought these. They're about coding and basic engineering. I thought we could look at them together." Malik's eyes lit up. He had been fascinated by robots and computers ever since he saw a video of a drone flying through an obstacle course. But his school didn't have many resources for coding, and his community center offered only a few out-of-date textbooks. Now here was James, a successful businessman, offering to teach him in person. A teacher, Ms. Alvarez, approached with a gentle smile. "Mr. Owen, thank you for coming. We appreciate any help you can give our students." She glanced at the other children, then whispered, "They're excited to meet someone from the outside world." James nodded politely to her and stood. He cleared his throat lightly. "Hi everyone, my name is James Owen. I work in technology, and I'm here today to share what I know about coding and how you can build simple projects with just a computer and an idea." The room went quiet for a moment as the children considered this. Then a few hands shot up. Malik raised his hand first. Can we really learn coding, even if we don't have fancy computers? He asked. James smiled. Absolutely, we'll start with the basics. How to write simple instructions that a computer can follow. You don't need a super advanced machine to learn. You just need curiosity and patience. He gestured to the laptop bag. I'll bring my laptop and we can use online tools. If the center doesn't have enough computers, I can donate a few later. A ripple of excitement passed through the group. Children whispered to each other, imagining themselves as future inventors and game designers. James guided them to a row of desktops against the wall. He plugged in his laptop to the projector so everyone could see the screen at the front. As he began his lesson, Malik scooted closer to the screen. James opened a simple code editor and typed a few lines of text. He explained each word and symbol clearly. This is a variable. It's like a labeled box where you can store information. This line tells the computer to display a message. He ran the code and the words "Hello World" appeared in a bold font. A few students giggled and clapped. Malik's eyes shone as he leaned in, absorbing every detail. James handed out printed worksheets he had prepared, step-by-step guides to writing their first program. He walked from desk to desk, helping students type the code correctly, fixing small typos, and offering encouraging words. Great job. You're getting it. Keep going. After the coding demonstration, James noticed some students struggling with basic math problems on their homework, so he offered to help. He sat beside Malik again, pointing at a fraction on the page. When you see 3/4, think of dividing a chocolate bar into 4 equal pieces and taking 3, he said. It's the same with numbers. Malik nodded, eyes bright, and solved the problem with a grin. As the session drew to a close, James packed up his laptop and books. The children gathered around him, chattering about what they had learned. A shy girl tugged at his sleeve, asking if he could come back next week. James looked at Ms. Alvarez, then down at the hopeful faces before him, and nodded. Of course, he said. I'll be here every Tuesday at noon. Outside, the sky had turned a soft orange as the sun began its slow descent. James walked with Malik toward the exit. Thank you, sir, Malik said. This means so much to me. He held the business card in his hand, but he didn't mention it. Instead, he talked about the project he wanted to build, a small robot that could follow a line on the floor. James listened closely. That's a great idea, he said. We can start with a kit, motors, sensors, a small circuit board. I'll bring one next week and we'll build it together. Malik's grin stretched from ear to ear. He had never felt so seen, so supported. Over the next few weeks, their meetings became a routine. Every Tuesday, James arrived with new materials. Textbooks, coding tutorials, and robotics kits. He introduced Malik and the other students to concepts like loops, conditional statements, and basic electronics. Each lesson built on the last. When a concept seemed too difficult, James found a new way to explain it, using drawings, simple analogies, or hands-on activities. The students thrived under this attention. Their grades improved, and they began sharing their new knowledge with younger siblings and friends. At home, Malik stayed up later working on coding exercises, his mind buzzing with ideas. He wrote pages of notes in a small notebook, filling lines with sketches of robots and flowcharts. As their bond grew, James found himself learning from Malik too. He saw the boy's resilience, the way Malik tackled each problem with determination, even when he made mistakes. He admired Malik's kindness, the way he helped classmates understand a concept before moving on. And he learned the simple joy of discovery, the excitement of seeing eyes light up when a line of code worked perfectly. One afternoon, while they soldered wires to a small motor, Malik paused and looked at James thoughtfully. Why are you helping us? He asked. You don't have to do this. James lowered his soldering iron and smiled. I help because I know what it's like to feel stuck, he said. When I was young, someone believed in me and showed me how to learn, and I want to do the same for you. He tapped the motor gently. Besides, I've enjoyed every minute. You remind me why I started in technology in the first place. Malik nodded, then went back to work, his hands steady as he connected the wires. When they finished, they placed the small robot on the table. It whirred to life, its wheels turning as it followed a black line drawn on a white sheet of paper. The children cheered. Malik looked over at James, pride shining in his eyes. As the robotics club grew, more volunteers joined. Parents, retired, engineers, and local college students offered their time. But James remained the driving force. He coordinated the lessons, donated equipment, and even arranged for field trips to his company's headquarters so the students could see real engineers at work. He watched the group transform from shy learners into confident creators. Through these weeks of shared learning, James and Malik crossed a line neither had expected. Their worlds, one of boardrooms and startups, the other of tight budgets and community support, merged in a small classroom filled with eager faces. The barriers that once seemed so real faded as they collaborated on projects, celebrated successes, and learned from failures. One day, after a lively session in which the students had built simple circuits that lit up tiny bulbs, James lingered in the empty classroom. He looked at the scattered wires, half-finished robots, and the whiteboard covered in colorful diagrams. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, unlike anything he had experienced in his career. Here he was not defined by profits or market share, but by the smiles and breakthroughs of young minds. Just then, Malik reappeared, carrying a folder. "I finished my science fair proposal," he said. He slid it across the table to James. The proposal outlined a project to clean stormwater runoff using a filter made from recycled materials and small sensors. Malik's handwriting was neat, and his diagrams were clear and detailed. James read the proposal with growing excitement. "This is excellent," he said, looking up. "You have a real chance to win. Let's work on this together." He stood and offered his hand. Malik shook it eagerly, and in that moment their partnership felt complete. They were not just student and teacher, they were collaborators, each learning from the other. As they packed up their things and switched off the lights, James realized that this was only the beginning of their journey. Together they had built trust, learned new skills, and crossed the divide between their very different lives. And in doing so, they had planted the seeds for something far greater than themselves. The night after Malik and James spent so many afternoons building robots and writing code, Malik's mother called him into the tiny living room. The lamp's light flickered over peeling wallpaper and a small sofa that had seen better days. Malik found her sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of overdue bills spread before her. Her face looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than usual. "Mom?" Malik asked softly, pulling out a chair. He sat beside her and looked at the papers. One of them was a notice from the landlord. Eviction notice, pay rent or vacate within 7 days. His heart sank. He knew how hard she worked, cleaning offices at dawn, then cashiering at the grocery store all day. Still, the rent was overdue by 2 months. Their savings had run out while they paid for school books, utilities, and a doctor's visit when Malik had caught a bad cold. Tears welled up in his mother's eyes. "I don't know what to do, Malik," she said, voice breaking. "I've asked for more hours, but the manager said they're cutting schedules this month. I tried to borrow money from friends, but everyone is struggling. I'm so sorry." She reached out and took his hand. "I promised you a stable home, and I'm not keeping that promise." Malik felt his throat tighten. He looked down at his hands. He had work projects and code to finish, science fair ideas he was excited about, but none of that mattered now. They could lose their home. He thought of the warm apartment where they shared rice and lentils for dinner, the laugh they always shared when they watched an old comedy show, and the small joys that made their place feel like home. He could not let it go. "Mom," he said firmly, "we'll find a way." But as the words left his lips, he felt the weight of uncertainty crushing him. He wanted to believe he could fix this, but he wasn't sure how. He remembered the silver business card he kept in his pocket, James Owen's card. The same card that had led James to the youth center, that had brought him into their lives not just as a tutor but as a friend. That card felt like a lifeline now. That night, Malik lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about James's kindness, How he had listened to Malik's robotic ideas. How he had stayed patient when Malik struggled with fractions. How he had cheered when the little robot had followed its line. James had given him more than knowledge. He had given him hope. Malik wondered if James might help his family now, though he felt embarrassed to ask such a big favor. The next morning, Malik woke early. His mother was still asleep on the sofa after a long shift. He quietly got dressed, found the business card in his shirt pocket, and slipped out the door. The late summer air was warm and the sun painted long shadows on the sidewalk. He walked quickly toward the youth center, his stomach twisting with anxiety. He hadn't told James about their troubles. He worried that James might judge them or feel sorry, and he hated feeling like a charity case. At the youth center, the front door was locked. A small sign said the center opened at 10. Malik looked at his watch. It was 9:45. He sat on the front steps and waited, his phone in his hand. When the doors opened, he rushed inside, scanning the lobby until he saw James talking with Ms. Alvarez, the center's director. The large windows behind James let in bright morning light, making him look almost like a statue in the calm room. Malik cleared his throat. James turned and smiled. "Good morning, Malik. Everything ready for today's session?" he asked, hands clasped behind his back. Malik swallowed hard, then shook his head. His voice shook a little as he spoke. "Sir, can I talk to you?" It's about my family." He held out the business card as if it were a shield. James saw the worry in Malik's eyes and nodded. "Of course, come with me." He led Malik to a small office in the back. The room smelled of books and whiteboard markers. James closed the door gently. Malik took a deep breath and told James about the eviction notice, the overdue rent, his mother's missing hours at work, and their fear of losing their home. He watched James's face carefully, afraid of disappointment. When Malik finished, there was a moment of silence. James stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Then he turned back, brows knitted in thought. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said softly. "I can see how much it's weighing on you." He walked to his desk and picked up his phone. "I'll make a few calls today, see what help is available." He tapped on the screen for a moment, then looked at Malik. "I know a few organizations that help with emergency rental assistance. I'll send them your mother's information if she's okay with that." Malik let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Thank you," he whispered. James nodded, then added, "And I want to support you directly, too. I'm going to offer your mother a scholarship to a summer STEM program I co-sponsor. It's full tuition and covers travel and materials. You have the grades and the drive. I'd like to help you expand your skills." Malik's eyes filled with tears. "But I don't deserve that," he said. "I'm just a kid trying to learn." James shook his head. "You deserve every opportunity. You've worked hard, and you've shown real talent. And your mother deserves relief from this burden so you can focus on your future." He smiled kindly. "Will you let me help? Can you talk to your mother and tell her about this?" Malik nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "I will," he said. "Thank you, sir. I can't believe you're doing this." James placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "It's my pleasure. You've given me more than I can repay. You reminded me why I do what I do." He opened the office door. "Come on, let's get to class. We have a robot to finish." That day, Malik returned home with a renewed sense of hope. After dinner, he sat with his mother and told her everything they had just discussed. At first, she was stunned into silence. Then she cried, tears of relief, gratitude, and pride. She called the rental assistance programs that James had recommended, and within days they received approval to cover their back rent. Malik's mother also accepted James's offer of a scholarship for Malik. He would attend the summer STEM program, where he would learn advanced topics, work in teams, and tour laboratories. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle. The eviction notice was withdrawn. The landlord, informed of the assistance, extended their lease. Malik's mother could breathe again, and she even found a few extra hours at her cashier job to add to the household budget without fear of falling behind. At the community center, James and Malik finished their robot project and presented it to the other students, celebrating with homemade cupcakes. At the end of the school year, Malik packed a small suitcase for the summer program. He folded his clothes carefully, placed his robotics notebook on top, and added the business card James had given him. As he closed the suitcase, he felt gratitude for the man who had quietly followed him in the park, who had returned to teach him, and who had now saved his family from losing their home. On the first day of the summer program, Malik and his mother arrived at the campus together. It was a bright morning, the kind that promises new beginnings. His mother kissed him on the cheek. "Make the most of this," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You've earned it." Malik looked at the towering buildings, the busy students, and the banners welcoming him and the other young innovators. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward, ready to learn, to grow, and to honor the kindness that had changed his life. The sun was just beginning to rise when Malik stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding with both nerves and excitement. Dressed in a neatly pressed suit and holding a folder full of notes, he looked out over the large auditorium filled with students, teachers, engineers, and a few familiar faces from his neighborhood. Somewhere in the front row sat James Owen, the man who had once handed him a silent gift of leftovers and had stayed in his life ever since. This was the biggest day of Malik's young life, the final presentation of his science fair project. The same project he had written months ago in a small room with flickering lights and the fear of eviction hanging over his head. Now here he was, standing in front of hundreds of people, ready to speak not just as a student but as someone with a voice, a purpose, and a dream. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear. "My name is Malik Jackson, and today I'm going to talk about something simple but powerful. A water filter made from recycled materials designed to help clean stormwater in neighborhoods like mine." As he spoke, he clicked through slides that showed his journey. Building the first model from a plastic bottle and charcoal, testing it with dirty water from a nearby drain, improving it again and again with feedback from mentors. He explained how his design used sensors to monitor water quality and how the data could help communities understand their environment better. The audience listened closely, nodding as Malik spoke with calm confidence. Even the judges, who had sat through dozens of presentations already, leaned in as he showed photos of children in his neighborhood helping test the filters. "This isn't just a science project," Malik said near the end. "It's a way to remind kids like me that we can solve real problems if someone gives us a chance." When he finished, there was a brief silence. Then loud applause filled the room. Malik looked down and smiled, not from pride, but from relief. He had done it. He had taken something that started as an idea in a small apartment and turned it into something that mattered. Later that day, as the judges announced the winners, Malik's name was called for first prize. He stood frozen for a moment, hardly believing what he had heard. Then slowly he walked back up to the stage to receive his award, a certificate, a scholarship to a leading engineering college, and a summer internship at a top innovation lab. Cameras flashed and people clapped, but Malik kept his eyes on one person, James. James stood clapping, his eyes shining with pride. As Malik stepped down, James met him with a handshake and a warm hug. "You did it," James whispered. "You've earned every bit of this." Malik smiled, feeling the weight of the award in his hands. "Thank you for believing in me," he said, "even when I didn't believe in myself." After the ceremony, James invited Malik to his company's office for a special tour. The modern building stood tall in the heart of the city, filled with glass walls, open spaces, and rooms lined with the latest technology. Malik walked through it all, wide-eyed, amazed at how far he had come. James introduced him to engineers, designers, and software experts. They asked him about his project, and he explained it with the same confidence he had shown on stage. In one meeting room, James stopped and turned to him. "Malik, this company was built on ideas, just like yours. When I started, I was young, full of dreams, and unsure of everything. But someone gave me a chance, and I've never forgotten that. Now it's your turn. We'd like to offer you a space here whenever you're ready, a desk, a computer, and the support to keep building what you started." Malik couldn't speak for a moment. Then he said softly, "I'd like that. I'd like that very much." The months passed quickly. Malik started his internship, joined college classes online, and worked part-time at James's company. He became known among the staff for his creativity and willingness to learn. He still returned to the youth center often, sometimes to teach, sometimes just to help out. The kids there looked up to him. They called him Coach Malik, or Professor M, and he laughed every time. He helped others the same way James had helped him. He brought books, computers, and kits for building small projects. He told the students, "It's okay not to know everything, just be curious, keep asking questions." And when he saw a child struggling, he'd kneel beside them and say, "I was where you are. You're not alone." One day, while visiting the same park where it all began, Malik sat on the same bench where James had once sat. The trees swayed gently, and the soft sounds of birds and city life filled the air. As he watched children run by and families enjoy the afternoon sun, he noticed a boy nearby. The boy looked about 10, his clothes a little worn, his eyes scanning the area nervously. The boy sat on the grass with a small bag beside him. Malik could see from where he sat that the boy had no food, just a bottle of water and an empty lunchbox. Malik remembered that feeling, being hungry, uncertain, and too shy to ask for help. He stood, walked over, and sat next to the boy. "Hey," Malik said kindly. "Everything okay?" The boy looked up. "I'm fine," he said quickly, though his voice was quiet. Malik reached into his bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil along with an apple. "I brought extra," he said. "Want to share?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, sir." Malik smiled. "You know, a long time ago I asked a stranger for leftovers right here on this grass. That day changed my life." The boy looked at him curiously. "Really?" Malik nodded. "Really. And now I try to pay it forward whenever I can." As they ate together, the city moved around them, busy and bright. Malik told the boy simple stories about science, robots, and the power of asking questions. He didn't mention his award or his job or the famous man who had once followed him in silence. He didn't need to. What mattered was right there. One act of kindness, shared under a tree, between two people who understood what it meant to hope. And in that small, quiet moment, the story that had begun with a single question, "Sir, can I have your leftovers?" found its way full circle, still changing lives one heart at a time.